Hello YouTube. As we talk about the UFO phenomenon and its secrets and various research, I want to tell you, my audience, about Soviet astronomers who had studied UFOs. We know that astronomers are trained observers. Now, Soviet trained astronomers were no different, but their observations remained largely unavailable until the 1990s. I already mentioned in my videos about the Soviet UFO research that Sergei Korolev, who was the father of the Soviet space exploration, he sent Professor Burdakov to the Central Astronomical Observatory of the Soviet Academy of Sciences at Pulkovo with a letter of recommendation, and this was a punishment for Burdakov's unauthorized UFO lectures. You see, in those years, 1950s, early 1950s, late 1940s, in those years, people in the USSR reported their UFO sightings to the astronomers because they had no other place to report them to except, the KGB of the time. And Burdakov, he was able to learn of fascinating reports which were received at the observatories from Soviet people. Now, what is fascinating is the extent to which the Soviets went to hide the facts that the astronomers did see UFOs. I also talked about in my books about a declassified Department of Defense information report in the United States, which was dated August 19, 1970. Now, the Americans followed Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov during his visit to Japan. The esteemed cosmonaut, who passed away in 2019, gave a presentation at the Takai University in Kanagawa Prefecture on May 18, 1970. Leonov said that he does not believe in the existence of unidentified flying objects. He stated categorically that there is no record of any of the Soviet observatories manned by highly trained technicians ever having seen a flying saucer. And the Soviet newspaper Pravda stated on February 29, 1968, that astronomers who carefully observe the sky day and night never see flying saucers. Both the cosmonaut and the Soviet newspaper concealed the true state of affairs. We do not know why, for there were reports of UFOs clearly of interest to astronomers and reported by astronomers of the Soviet Union. So definitely there were reasons not to talk about UFOs in the USSR, as I explained, because often military tests were observed and mistaken for UFOs. But there is something else that's underlying this attempt to conceal UFO information. So let me tell you about astronomers who actually were seeing UFOs and not afraid to talk about them. Back in the 1960s, Robert Vitolnik reported something quite unusual. Now, he was in charge of the radio observation station of the ionosphere at the Radiophysical Observatory of the Academy of Sciences, USSR, of the Latvia branch. On July 26, 1965, he and others studied the ionosphere and silvery clouds from the observation center of the city of Ogra. The astronomers saw an unusually bright star moving in the westward direction quite slowly. They used a powerful telescope and observed the UFO. The object was a lens-shaped disk, its diameter around 100 meters. In the center there was a clearly defined thickening like a small sphere. Next to the disk, at a distance of approximately 200 meters, they saw three spheres similar to the one in the thickening. the spheres rotated slowly around the disk. The objects were becoming smaller, apparently moving away from the Earth. 20 minutes later, the spheres distanced themselves from the disk, flying in different directions. The sphere in the middle of the disk also separated. Their color was greenish pearly hue, okay? And it was dull. Vitornik and other astronomers were certain that they observed neither space rocket nor satellite. Such objects would have moved at much greater velocities. Of course, no rocket or satellite consisted of different objects, unlike those mystery objects observed by Soviet astronomers in June of 1965. I've collected a number of reports which I will list in my video, but I also want to thank Mikhail Gerstein, who collected information about astronomers and UFOs, and he wrote about such observations back in 1996 for the Russian Anomalia newspaper. It was issue 20, and I remember it very well. So one of his reports was about the 1967, July 18, when the Pulkovskaya astronomer Potter had observed a strange blast near the town of Kislovodsk. It formed a reddish cloud sphere surrounded by waves of white luminescence. His colleagues informed the astronomer that several hours before they observed a flying sickle-shaped object. 1 month later, another astronomer, Sazanov, saw one more sickle-shaped body in the area. A star-shaped object flying ahead of it or in front of it accompanied that UFO. The sickle finally changed its shape to a disc and vanished. And on September 21, 1968, Tsekhanovich, astronomer and lecturer of the Moscow Planetarium, observed another sickle for an hour. So did many other local inhabitants. Now, Mikhail Gerstein was able to obtain a statistical analysis of the UFO observations produced by the Institute of Space Research of the Academy of Sciences USSR. The report, published in 1979, stated that 7.5% of UFO observers were actually astronomers. Now, this was after the Petrozavodsk phenomenon, when the military research was in full swing. The astronomers could not be silenced, not even when Stalin ruled the Soviet Union. And those astronomers, they talked. For example, Donatas Miazys-Auskas, a Lithuanian astrophysicist, mentioned in an interview to Komajinunimo Tiesa newspaper that it is not random observers who see UFOs and similar phenomena most frequently. Astronomers and meteorologists observe much more, and as experts are able to classify the object. On numerous occasions, Lithuanian astronomers had observed phenomena they could not identify. So did Miazyauskas. While working in the Maletsky Observatory, he took photos of a jumping star, an object he could never explain. In 1978, Lithuanian scientist Dr. Vytautas Stražlys published an article in Moskvas ir Gyvenimas magazine. It was titled in English Anomalous Phenomena in the Atmosphere and Space, and mentioned some 30 UFO reports in the Vilnius Observatory. The most fascinating one, dated August 20th, 1974, actually came from different localities at the same time. It described a triangle of 140 meters in size. The UFO hovered over Raisenyai for 12 hours at the altitude of 20 kilometers. Of course, then there is the Felix Ziegel's book, UFO Sightings over the USSR, 1968, Volume 1. It was published by Joint USA-CIS Aerial Anomalies Federation in 1993. It contains a fascinating report sent to Ziegel by Astronomers. Now, surely a prominent personality of the Soviet space program, Soviet cosmonaut Leonov and his colleagues must have read Ziegel's books, available through the black markets of the Soviet Union and other more sinister places, like the KGB. But you know what? It's not right to blame Leonov and other debunkers for his statements in Tokyo. He was only a Soviet citizen, and he had to observe the rules. And he was not the one setting the rules. Let's talk about another observation. The place was Soviet Azerbaijan, and the year was 1964, and the date was November 30th. Observers at the Shemokhinsky Astrophysical Observatory of the Soviet Academy of Sciences in Rurcla observed an unusual celestial object. It moved from west to north, its maximal altitude about 30 degrees. The observation of the object began at an altitude of 3 to 4 degrees above the horizon, and they followed until it attenuated. Its speed was approximately 1 degree per minute. The path passed 7 to 10 degrees below the constellation Aquila, a little below the head of Draco, and appeared 2 or 3 degrees to the right of Ursa Major. Two the parts of the object were easily distinguished, its head and tail. The head looked like planetary mistiness with a sharp internal edge and a diffused outer edge. Located in the center was a star-shaped object of a 3rd and 4th stellar magnitude that was a point even in an 8-1 astronomical telescope. No sound effects were noted. Komlev, a Soviet scientist, filed a report regarding a UFO sighting that he had observed in September of 1981. Komlev, a trained meteorologist, had professional experience in observation of the atmospheric meteorological phenomena, flights of weather balloons, and more. Komlev sent his report to the Commission for the Study of Anomalous Phenomena. I talked about such commissions elsewhere in my videos and books. It was a very interesting creation of the Soviet government, basically to siphon off information from the population. Komlev's report was sent in 1985. He read about this commission in Soviet newspapers. Okay? So the night of the observation was at the end of September 1981. He did not recall the exact date, even during the interview with a member of the commission. It was about quarter after midnight Moscow time, and Komlev, who was a passenger aboard Tu-134 flight from Balkhash to Moscow, observed an unusual phenomenon. The airplane at the time was in the vicinity of the Vnukovo airport, at the altitude of approximately 8,000 meters, and its speed about 800 kilometers per hour. The object was seen by almost all passengers, who observed it through the portholes. The object was cigar-shaped, and Komlev estimated its size was similar to the size of an airplane hull. If viewed from the distance of 2 to 3 kilometers. Apparently, the object flew about 30 kilometers above the Tu-134. Its speed or velocity is similar to that of the airplane. Now, they could not determine the direction of the flight. The color of the object was white-yellowish. The observers did not see any sections or components of the object. None of them could identify the object. They saw no residue or inversion. No effect on humans or on board equipment was detected or registered. The atmosphere at the time was transparent. One could see the stars and the ground. The sighting lasted about 2 minutes. Then the airplane changed its course and they did not see the object again. The airplane was not allowed to land for an extended period of time. Komlev believed this was the consequence of the appearance of the anomalous phenomena that they had observed. Again, we still do not know why the Soviets attempted to mislead their citizens and Westerners about astronomical observations in such a clumsy fashion. We also may not find out for some time why the United States intelligence report mentioned above dedicated a whole paragraph to Leonov's views about UFOs. We do not know why some Western astronomers emulated their Soviet colleagues in fervent debunking attempts or endeavors. One thing is for sure, just like their counterparts in the West, Soviet astronomers had observed and recorded UFO sightings. And like such observations made by anyone else, many of the sightings have gone unexplained despite the obvious academic qualifications and observational expertise held by the various Soviet astronomers who made such UFO observations. Now, I want to talk about Ukrainian astronomers. I was born and spent my youth in Kiev, Soviet Ukraine, so the subject is important to me. UFO research and developments in that country. So I want to introduce my audience to Alexei Viktorovich Arkhipov. There is a research institute in Ukraine dedicated to ufology, and there are UFO research projects of great importance to science undertaken by the RIAP, this institute. The Scientific Council and Advisory Board of the Institute has included such Russian and Ukrainian specialists in the UFO field research and SETI field, such as Arkhipov, radio astronomer, who has discovered supposed ET radio source near some distant stars. So let's talk about this capable scientist. When it comes to ufologists and stories about UFOs, general population is already used to it, but to write dissertations about it, well, science is not Hollywood, where every producer can invent anything about aliens. Here we need irrefutable evidence and accurate calculations. Apparently, Arkhipov has all of this, since he successfully defended his candidacy. The dissertation was evaluated by highly respected scientists. His supervisor in this was the director of the Radio Astronomy Institute of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, Leonid Litvinenko. And the opponent was no other than Lev Gindelis from the Sternberg Astronomical Institute of the Moscow State University. Russian newspaper reporters told Arkhipov that the topic of his dissertation is very unusual. Arkhipov explained that this is the first scientific research on SETI in the last 260 years. You see, SETI is the worldwide abbreviation for the Research for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI. Only in 1726 and 1740, dissertations on the habitability of the moon were defended at the University of Utrecht in Netherlands. Another question that the Ukrainian scientist has been asked, so you do know why we still have not met with the little green man? And he answered that perhaps highly developed civilizations have nothing to talk about with us yet. For example, he says, I have almost no contact even with my neighbors. I believe that so far we, as neighborhood hooligans or hoodlums, are not very interested don't make aliens or other civilizations very interested in us. But there may be other reasons. For example, a real Star Wars can go on in space, and our so-called brothers in intelligence, they're not up to deal with us. We're not their concern. So to say evidence, well, Arkhipov provides evidence. On November 30, 1996, in a distant galaxy designated NGC 664, in the atlases, two supernova stars flashed simultaneously next to each other. And the science fiction author Arthur Clarke wrote to the Ukrainian Astronomer about this. And he said, "It scared me. The coincidence is impossible." Was this an industrial accident? A space war? And Arkhipov says, "We have been trying to get in touch with extraterrestrial intelligence for just the last 50 years. And our galaxy is 12 billion years old. Why look not for contemporaries, but for traces of ancient civilizations? For example, on the moon." And you know what? Arkhipov knows quite a lot about the moon. So how do we look for other intelligent species? And he explains. 1. By powerful radio emission, which should be accompanied by information and production processes of highly developed civilizations. Most likely they have already carried out their industrial zones into space, so as not to pollute their home planet. I mean, this is a great idea. Knowing what we have done to planet Earth and how we polluted it. That the idea that, an advanced civilization takes out their processes in outer space and leaves their Earth pristine. This is great. Okay, let's continue. The second point. By magnetic radiation in the decameter wavelength range, its source is artificial magnetospheres, with which our space neighbors must protect their orbital stations from the dangerous solar wind. So this is one of the ways to find them. Third, by the radio beam of someone else's reconnaissance probe. After all, if we are being watched, for example, from orbit or from the moon, it means that the received information must somehow be transferred back. Thus, the catch is not a signal directed to the Earth, as they're doing now, but on the contrary, coming from it. And please see my videos about China and the moon and the recent discoveries about the possibility of observers from the moon. Number 4, on space debris. Not only meteorites, but also the remnants of the activity of intelligent creatures could accidentally fall from space to Earth. Over 1 billion years, they could accumulate up to several hundred. It is worth looking for unusual, similar to artificial objects in the ancient geological layers. Several such findings have already been described in scientific literature, and I will soon, my audience, bring you Russian information which I've collected, which you should know in the West. I mean, I've spoken about some of it in my presentations on television and books, but I'll bring more, because I keep doing research and keep finding out as much as possible. Also, Arkhipov stated, and he was asked, so are your ideas already put into practice? And Arkhipov stated, hardly ever. SETI is conservative. They believe that it is necessary to look for signals sent to us by extraterrestrial civilizations. And why should their messages be exactly what we're looking for, in the form of variable signals at the same frequency? Everything else tends to be attributed to interference of unknown origin. And he was asked, have you found something? And he said, 2 pairs of mysterious sources are in the constellation Eagle near Altair, Another pair is in the southern constellation of Hydra, in the region of the star indicated on the maps by the Greek letter Xi. The third pair is in the constellation Eridanos. The radio emission of this object is constant and recorded at different wavelengths, from centimeters to meters. What about artificial magnetic radiation? And he said the radio source indicated by the code GR0752-01 coincide with the relatively close to us, like only 19 parsecs, star HD 64606, reminiscent of the Sun. Did you catch the radio beam coming from the Earth? Well, he said in 1985, the American, whose last name was Gray, reported in the press, in the media, about a suspicious radio signal which he detected by a makeshift installation to search for radio signals from extraterrestrial civilizations. This signal was directed to a nearby solar-type star, RO, from the constellation Cancer. Later, it was at this star that a planet similar to Jupiter was discovered. So think about it. Somebody may be sending signals from our planet to their home planet. Think of the implications. Alexei Arkhipov is the author of the unique encyclopedia. In English, it would be translated as Mysteries and Secrets of the Moon. Here's a quote from this work. The history of flights to the moon is so dramatic and full of mysteries that it resembles the legends of the Bermuda Triangle. Over the entire period, 100 attempts have been made to send spacecraft from Earth to the moon. Of this, only 44% of the cases of the flight program was completed. And when flying to far more distant Venus, despite its clouds of sulfuric, hydrochloric, and hydrofluoric acids, 67% of the launches were successful. Flights to the nearest moon are noticeably more dangerous than to the distant hellish planet. Now, this was before the most recent Chinese research of the moon, but I bring that information in my other videos. You can find them if you look to the channel, my channel. Also, he says, some of the accidents of the lunar apparatus were preceded by strange incidents on the moon. According to the American Lunar Society, during the flight of the Hago-Roma probe on the dark side of the moon, a mysterious spot shone for at least half an hour. Then something flashed in the crater of Aristarchus. In the circus of Gassendi, the orange light ominously burned. The device entered selenocentric orbit, but it was not possible to establish a radio connection with it. So something strange is happening on the moon. Mysterious flashes, lights, clouds, ominous statistics of accidents of lunar probes. It seems that the reconnaissance vehicles of Earthlings on the moon are hindering someone. And of course, we really don't know the exact discoveries of this recent Chinese space mission. Continues on the dark side of the moon. I mean, I brought you as much information as I was able to find, but definitely there is something more. So whom are we hindering? Whose plans are we messing up? Well, yes, all the same so-called brothers in intelligence or other intelligent species. Arkhipov believes that the moon is a very convenient base for observing the Earth. It is possible that we have long ago seen someone's presence on the moon, but just do not dare to think about it, he writes. It is not for nothing that ancient Egyptians called the moon as the eye of Ra, their god, watching us. 4 decades ago, The United States military was vividly interested in our neighbor, hoping to cover it with a network of military bases and turn it into a kind of the observation eye of the Pentagon. The advantages are obvious. Reconnaissance satellites and the battle stations are easily detectable and vulnerable in their near-Earth orbits. But try to find the same devices if you place them on the moon. You can catch aliens on the moon. Arkhipov believes that the moon can serve as an indicator of someone else's presence in the solar system for over 4 billion years. So he was asked, you managed to discover something unusual on the moon. What does it look like? Well, to the ruins of the uncut of ancient cities of Mesopotamia and Khwarezm, that's what it's similar to. It is generally accepted that if modern astronomers still have not noticed any structures on the moon, then there is nothing to look for. This is reckless, says Arkhipov. Once he showed an aerial photograph of the area of ancient Egyptian burials in Giza and a surface photograph in the area of the landing of the Apollo 15 expedition, and he showed to the corresponding member of the Space Academy, USSR, Rubtsov. The expert considered the first shot just an enlarged fragment of the second and was very surprised to learn that we're talking about different celestial bodies. So he's asked again, is there life on Mars? And he says it will be strange if it is not there. After all, on Mars, just like on Earth, meteorites containing organic compounds fell, from which, according to some scientists, life was born on our planet. But even on Mars 3-4 billion years ago, the ocean splashed and it rained. It's also a very life-generating environment. You just need to look right and you'll find it. Arkhipov has more interesting information about the moon, and I'll describe his discoveries in my future comprehensive video about the Soviet, Russian and Ukrainian researchers. Prepare to be amazed. But I wanted to bring to your attention that it's not just all debunking that's coming from astronomers. There are solid scientists who talk about it. I know that there are attempts to silence them, but they're not afraid to look up in the sky to gaze at the stars, to gaze at the amazing, strange things that observe us from the sky, or maybe send signals from our planet to other points in the galaxy. I thank you for your attention. I ask that you please support my research. You will see the links that show you how you can support it, and I'll bring you more videos in the near future. Thank you, and be safe, all of you.